Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. Rick Riordan, Percy Jackson and the Olympians. The Lightning Thief. Illustrated by John Rocco. Camp Half-Blood. 1. Long Island Sound. 2. Dining Pavilion. 3. Cabins. 4. Climbing Walls. 5. Amphitheater. 6. Pegasus Stables. 7. Armory. 8. 8. Canoe Lake. 9. Arts and Crafts. 10. Forge. 11. Combat Arena. 12. Strawberry Fields. 13. Volleyball Court. 14. Big House. 15. Thalia's Pine. Rick Riordan, Percy Jackson and the Olympians. The Lightning Thief. Illustrated by John Rocco. Disney Hyperion, Los Angeles, New York. To Hallie, who heard the story first. Contents. Title page. Copyright. Dedication. First chapter. I accidentally vaporized my pre-algebra teacher. Second. 3 old ladies knit the socks of death. Third. Grover unexpectedly loses his pants. 4. My mother teaches me bullfighting. 5. I play pinochle with a horse. I became supreme lord of the bathroom. My dinner goes up in smoke. We capture a flag. I'm offered a quiz. I ruin a perfectly good purse. We visit the garden of Gnome Emporium. We get advice from a poodle. I plunged to my death. I became a known fugitive. Our God buys us cheeseburgers. We take a zebra to Vegas. We shop for waterbeds. Annabeth does obedience school. We find out the truth. Sort of. I battle my jerk relative. I settle my tab. The prophecy comes true. Acknowledgements about the author and illustrator. I accidentally vaporized my pre-algebra teacher. Look, I didn't want to be a half-blood. If you are reading this because you think you might be one, my advice is close this book right now. Believe whatever lie your mom or dad told you about your birth and try to lead a normal life. Being a half-blood is dangerous. It's scary. Most of the time, it gets you killed in painful, nasty ways. If you are a normal kid reading this because you think it's fiction, great. Read on. I envy you for being able to believe that none of this ever happened. But if you recognize yourself in these pages, if you feel something stirring inside, stop reading immediately. You might be one of us, and once you know that, it's only a matter of time before they sense it too, and they will come for you. Don't say I didn't warn you. My name is Percy Jackson. I am 12 years old. Until a few months ago, I was a boarding student at Yancey Academy, a private school for troubled kids in upstate New York. Am I a troubled kid? Yeah, you could say that. I could start at any point in my short, miserable life to prove it. But things really started going bad at last May, when our sixth grade class took a field trip to Manhattan. 28 mental case kids and two teachers on a yellow school bus heading to Metropolitan Museum of Art to look at ancient Greek and Roman stuff. I know it sounds like torture. Most fancy field trips were, but Mr. Burner, our Latin teacher, was leading this trip, so I had hopes. Mr. Brunner was this middle-aged guy in a motorized wheelchair. He had a thinning hair and a scruffy beard and a frayed tweed jacket, which always smelled like coffee. You wouldn't think he'd be cool, but he told stories and joked. And let us play games in class. He also had this awesome collection of Roman armors and weapons. So, he was the only teacher whose class didn't put me to sleep. I hoped the trip would be okay. At least, I hoped that for once I wouldn't get in trouble. Why? Was I wrong? See, that thing happens to me on field trips. Like at my fifth grade school when we went to the Saratoga battlefield. I had this accident with a Revolutionary War cannon. I wasn't aiming for the school bus, but of course I got expelled. Anyway, before that, at my fourth grade school, when we took a behind the scenes tour of the Marine World Shark pool, I sort of hit the wrong lever on the catwalk and our class took an unplanned swim. And the time before that, will you get that idea? This trip, I was determined to be good. All the way into the city, I put up the Nancy Bobo fit, the wrinkly red-headed kleptomaniac girl, hitting my friend Grover in the back of the head, a chunk of peanut butter and ketchup sandwich. Grover was an easy target. He was a scrawny. He cried when he got frustrated. He must have been held back several grades because he was the only sixth grader with acne and start a wispy beard on his chin. On top of all that, he was crippled. He had a note excusing him for PE for the rest of his life because he had some kind of muscular disease in his legs. He walked funny, like every step hurt him. But don't let that fool you. You should have seen him run when it was enchilada day in the cafeteria. Anyway, Nancy Bobovic was throwing vats of sandwich that stuck in his curly brown hair, and she knew I couldn't do anything back to her because I was already on probation. The headmaster had threatened me with death by in school suspension if anything bad, embarrassing, or even mildly entertaining happened on the street. I'm going to kill her, I mumbled. Grover tried me to calm down. It's okay. I like peanut butter. He dodged another piece of Nancy's lunch. That's it. I started to get up. Grover pulled me back to my seat. You are already on probation, he reminded me. You know who will get blamed if anything happens. Looking back on it, I wished I had decked Nancy Bobofit right then and there. In school suspension would have nothing compared to the mess I was about to get myself into. He rode, he rode up his in his front wheelchair. He rode up front in his wheelchair, guiding us through the big echoey galleries, past marble statues and glass cases full of really old black and orange pottery. I blew my mind that this stuff had survived for 2,000, 3,000 years. He gathered us around a 13-foot tall stone column with a big sphinx on top and started telling us how it was a grave marker, a stele for a girl about our age. He told us about the carvings on the sides. I was trying to listen to what he had to say because it was kind of interesting. But everybody around me was talking, and every time I told him to shut up, teacher, other teacher, Saffron, Mr. Dodds would give. Mr. Dodds was this little math teacher from Georgia who always wore a black leather jacket. Even though she was 50-year-old, she looked mean enough to ride a Harley right into your locker. She had come to Yancey Hallway halfway through the year. When our last math teacher had nervous breakdown from her first day, Mrs. Dodds loved Nancy Bobofit and figured I was devil's spawn. She would point her quick crook finger at me and say, "Now, honey, real sweet," and I knew I was going to get after school detention for a month. One time, after she had made me erase answers out of old math workbooks until midnight, I told Grover I didn't think Mrs. Dodds was human. He looked at me real serious and said, "You are absolutely right." Mr. Brunner kept talking about Greek funeral art. Finally, Nancy Bogofit snickered something about the naked guy on the steel, and I turned around and said, "Will you shut up?" It came out louder than I meant to. The whole group laughed. Mr. Brunner stopped his story. "Mr. Jackson," he said, "did you have a comment?" My face was totally red. I said, "No, sir." Mr. Brunner pointed to one of the pictures on stage. "Perhaps you will tell us what this picture represents." I looked at the carving and felt a flush of relief because I actually recognized it. That's Kronos eating his kids. "Right, yes," Brunner said, obviously not satisfied. "And he did this because, well," I racked my brain to remember. "Kronos was the king god, and God?" Mr. Brunner asked. "Sorry, Titan," I corrected myself. "And he didn't trust his kids, who were the gods. So, Kronos ate them, right? But his wife hid baby Zeus and gave Kronos a rock to eat instead. And later, when Zeus grew up, he tricked his dad, Kronos, into buffering up his brothers and sisters." "Ew," said one of the girls behind me. "And so there was a big fight between gods and titans," I continued. and the gods won. Some snickers from the group behind me. Nancy Buffett mumbled to a friend, like we are going to use this in real life, like it's going to say on our job applications. Please explain why Kronos ate his kids and why Mr. Jackson, Bruno said. To paraphrase Miss Bobofet's excellent question, does this matter in real life? Bursted, Grover muttered. Shut up, Nancy hissed, her face even brighter red than her hair. At least Nancy got back too. Mr. Bruno was the only one who ever caught her saying anything wrong. He had radar ears. I thought about this question and shrugged. I don't know, sir. I see. Mr. Bruno looked disappointed. Well, half credit, Mr. Jackson. Zeus did indeed feed Kronos a mixture of mustard and wine, which made him disgorge his 5 other children, who, of course, being immortal God, had been living and growing completely undigested in Titan's stomach. The gods defeated their father, sliced him to pieces with his own scythe, and scattered his remains in Tartarus, darkest part of the underworld. On that happy note, it's time for lunch. Mrs. Dodds, would you lead us back outside? The class drifted off, the girls still holding their stomachs, the guys pushing each other around and acting like doofuses. Grover and I were about to follow when Mr. Brunner said, Mr. Jackson, I knew that was coming. I told Grover to keep going. Then I turned toward Mr. Grover. So, Mr. Brunner had this look that wouldn't let you go. Intense brown eyes that could have been 1,000-year-old and seen everything. You must learn the answer to my question, Brunner told me, about the Titans, about real life, how how your studies apply to it. Oh, what you learn from me, he said, is vitally important. I expect you to treat it as such. I will accept the only best from you, Percy Jackson. I wanted to get angry. This guy pushed me so hard. I mean, sure, it was kind of cool on tournament days when he dressed up in a suit of Roman armor and shouted, What-o! And challenged us, sword pointing against chalk, to run to the board and name every Greek and Roman person who had ever lived, and their mother, and what god they worshipped. But Mr. Brunner accepted expected me to be as good as everybody else, despite the fact that I have dyslexia and attention deficit disorder, and I had never made above a C minus in my life. No, he didn't expect me to be as good. He expected me to be better, and I just couldn't learn all those names and facts. Much spell, less spell them correctly. Mumbled something about trying harder, while Mr. Brunner took one long sad look at the ceiling, like he had been at this girl's funeral. He told me to go outside and eat my lunch. Give me the evil eye. class gathered on the front steps of the museum, where we could watch the food traffic along Fifth Avenue. Overhead, a huge storm was brewing, with clouds blacker than I had ever seen over the city. I figured maybe it was global warming or something, because the weather all across the New York State had been weird since Christmas. We would have massive snowstorms, flooding, wildfires from lightning strikes. I wouldn't have been surprised if this was a hurricane blowing in. Nobody else seemed to notice. Some of the guys were pelting pigeons with Lunchables crackers. Nancy Bogofitt was trying to pickpocket something from a lady's purse, and, of course, Mrs. Dodds wasn't even seeing a thing. Grover and I sat on the edge of the fountain, away from the others. We thought that maybe if we did that, everybody wouldn't know we are from that school. The school for loser freaks who couldn't make it elsewhere. Detention? Grover asked. Nah, I said. Not from Bruno. I just wish he had lay off me sometimes. I mean, I'm not a genius. Grover didn't say anything for a while. Then, when I thought he was going to give me some deep philosophical comment to make me feel better, he said, Can I have your apple? I didn't have much of an appetite, so I let him take it. I watched the streams of cabs going down Fifth Avenue and thought about my mom's apartment, only a little ways up to the uptown from where we sat. I hadn't seen her since Christmas. I wanted so bad to jump in a taxi and head home. She would hug me and be glad to see me, but she had been disappointed too. She had sent me right back to Yancy. Me that I had to try harder, even if this was my sixth school in 6 years, and I was probably going to be kicked out again. I wouldn't be able to stand that look she had gave me. Mr. Brunner parked his wheelchair at the base of the handicap ramp. He ate celery while he read a paperback novel. A red umbrella stuck up from the back of his chair, making it look like a motorized cafe table. I was about to unwrap my sandwich when Nancy Bogofitt appeared in front of me with her ugly French. I guess she had gotten tired of stealing from tourists and dumped her half-eaten lunch in Grover's lap. Oops, she grinned at me with her crooked teeth. Her freckles were orange, as if somebody had spray painted her with liquid Cheetos. I tried to stay cool. The school counselor had told me a million times, count to 10, get control of your temper. But I was so mad, my mind went blank. I vibrated in my ears. I don't remember touching her, but the next thing I knew, Nancy was sitting on her butt in the fountain, screaming, Percy pushed me. Mrs. Dodds materialized next to us. Some some of the kids were whispering, "Did you see the water? Like it grabbed her." I didn't know what they were talking about. All I knew that I was in trouble again. As soon as Mrs. was sure poor little Nancy was okay, promising to get her new shirt at museum gift shop, etc., etc. Mrs. Dodds turned to me. There was triumphant fire in her eyes, as if I'd done something she had been waiting for all semesters. Now, honey, I know, I grumbled. A month erasing workbooks. That wasn't the right thing to say. Come with me, Mrs. Todd said. Wait, Grover. It was me. I pushed her. I stared at him, stunned. I couldn't believe that he was trying to cover for me. Mrs. Dodge scared Grover to death. She glared at him so hard his whiskery chin trembled. I don't think so, Mr. Underwood, she said. But you will stay here. Grover looked at me desperately. It's okay, man, I told him. Thanks for trying. Honey, Mrs. Dodge back at me. Now, Nancy Boberfit smirked. I gave her my deluxe. I will kill you later, stare. Then I turned to my two-faced Mrs. Dodds, but she wasn't there. She was standing at the museum entrance, way at the top of the steps, gesturing impatiently at me to come on. How did she get there so fast? I have moments like that a lot, when my brain falls asleep or something, and next thing I know, I have missed something, as if a puzzle piece fell out of the universe and left me staring at the blank place behind it. The school counselor told me this was a part of the ADHD. My brain misinterpreting things. I wasn't so sure. I went after Mrs. Dodge. Halfway up the steps, I glanced back to Grover. He was looking pale, cutting his eyes between me and Mr. Brunner, like he wanted Mr. Brunner to notice what was going on. But Mr. Brunner was absorbed in his novel. I looked back up. Mrs. Dodds has disappeared again. She was now inside the building, at the end of the entrance hall. Okay, I thought, she's going to make me buy a new shirt for Nancy at the gift shop. But apparently that wasn't the plan. I followed her deeper in the museum. When I finally caught up to her, we were back in the Greek and Roman section. Except for us, the gallery was empty. Mrs. Dodds stood with her arms crossed in front of a big marble frieze of the Greek gods. She was making this weird noise in her throat, like growling. Even without the noise, I would have been nervous. It's weird being alone with a teacher, especially Mrs. Dodds. Something about the way she looked at the frieze, as if she wanted to pulverize it. You have been giving us problems, honey, she said. I did the same thing, I said. Yes, ma'am. She, she tugged on the cuffs of her leather jacket. Did you really think you would get away with it? The look in her eyes was beyond mad. It was evil. She's a teacher, I thought nervously. It's not like she's going to hurt me. I said, I will try harder, ma'am. Thunder shook the building. We are not fools, Percy Jackson, Mr. Dodge said. It was only a matter of time before we found you out. Confess, you will suffer less pain. I didn't know what he was talking about. I didn't know what she was talking about. All I could think of was that teachers must have found the illegal stash of candy I had been selling out my dorm room. Or maybe uh, th- uh, they got my essay on Tom Sawyer's from the internet without even reading the book. And now they were going to take away my grade. Or worse, they were going to make me read the book. Well, she demanded. Ma'am, I don't. Your time is up, she hissed. The weirdest thing happened. Her eyes began to glow like barbecue coals. Her fingers stretched into talons. Her jacket melted into large leathery wings. She wasn't human. She was a shriveled hag with bat wings and claws and a mouthful of yellow fangs, and she was about to slice me to ribbons. Then things got even stranger. Mr. Brunner, who had been out in the front of the museum on his wheelchair, into, uh, into the doorway of the gallery, holding a pen in his hand. "What ho, Percy!" he shouted, and tossed the pen through the air. Sir Dodge lunged at me. With a yelp, I dodged and fell down, slashed the next air next to my ears. I snapped the ballpoint pen out of the air, but when it hit my hand, it wasn't a pen anymore. It was a sword. Mr. Brunner's a bronze sword, which he always used on tournament days. She Dot spun toward me with a murderous look in her eyes. My knees were jellies. My hand was shaking so bad I almost dropped the sword. She snarled, "Die, honey!" And she flew straight at me. Absolute terror ran through my body. I did the only thing that came naturally. I swung the sword. The metal blade hit her shoulder and passed clean through her body, as if she were made of water. Hiss! Mr. Dodge was a sand castle in a power fan. She exploded into a yellow powder, vaporized on the spot, leaving nothing but the smell of sulfur and a dying screech, and a chill of evil in the air, as if those glowing red eyes were still watching me. I was alone. There was a ballpoint pen in my hand. Mr. Brunner wasn't there. Nobody was there but me. My hands were still trembling. My lunch must have been contained with the magic mushrooms or something. Had I imagined the whole thing? I went back outside. It started to rain. Grover was sitting by the fountain. I made a map tilted over his head. Nancy Bogofitz was still standing there, soaked from her swim in the fountain, grumbling to her ugly friends. When she saw me, she said, "I know Mrs. Kerr wished your butt." I said, "Who?" "Our teacher, duh." I blinked. We had no teacher named Mrs. Kerr. I asked Nancy what she was talking about. She rolled her eyes and turned away. I asked Grover where Mrs. Dodds was. He said, "Who?" But he paused first, and he wouldn't look at me. So I thought he was messing with me. "Not funny, man," I told him. "This is serious." Thunder boomed overhead. I saw Mr. Brunner sitting under his umbrella, reading his book, as if he had never moved. I went over to him. He looked up, a little distracted. Ah, that would be my pen. Please bring your own writing utensils in the future, Mr. Jackson. I handed Mr. Brunner his pen. I hadn't realized I was still holding it. So, I said, "Where's Mrs. Dodge?" He stared at me blankly. "Who?" "The chaperone, Mrs. Dodge, the pre-algebra teacher." He frowned and sat forward, looking mildly concerned. "Percy, there is no Mrs. Dodge on the strip. As far as I know, there has been a Mrs. Dodge at Yancey Academy. Are you feeling all right?"